Some harsh criticism for the president's health care law. A panelist on ABC's This Week calling it a slow-motion train wreck. Another saying it requires mass irrationality after the administration has delayed one of the key provisions of the law. Let's listen.
Even Democrats saying that implementing Obamacare has the potential to be a train wreck. Well, now you have the prospect of a slow-motion train wreck. And here's the thing about this particular provision. This affects thousands of workers, maybe, not the millions of workers who are going to be impacted over the long haul on this. So if you couldn't even get this piece of it right after a 3-year ramp-up period, you're saying you need another year and a half just to put in this tiny slice of Obamacare?
Oh, but it's not a tiny slice. This is huge. I mean, employer mandates are by far the toughest part of it.
It's the toughest to implement, but it's by no means the most complicated.
Well, is there more to come, and will Obamacare ever be fully implemented? Jonah Goldberg is the editor-at-large for National Review, also a Fox News contributor. Thanks for being with us.
It's great to be here.
So the Obama administration announced last week it's postponing the requirement that employers provide coverage or face fines. Now, the argument being made on This Week was you can't delay the employer mandate without also delaying the individual mandate, because if workers are still required to have the coverage but businesses are not required to provide it, you're just shifting the cost from employers to workers. That's according to the Cato Institute. Do you agree?
I think that's largely right. It also helps explain, or might help explain, why the Obama administration very quietly announced that it will not be trying to verify who qualifies for subsidies for Obamacare premiums either. They're basically going to say, if you call up and say you qualify for a check from the government for Obamacare subsidies, then you'll get one, and they won't try to confirm what your income is or any of your other qualifications. And that may be one way to seduce more people into the system, because that's one of the main problems with this thing, is that the incentives aren't there for the number of young, healthy people to sign up that are necessary to keep this thing from going into what the actuaries call a death spiral.
Right, and and to that point, as of right now, the individual mandate is still in place, and that means that starting this October, all individuals must get insurance or pay a fine. But as George Will pointed out, the fine is 3 to 5 times less expensive than the insurance premium. So George Will says young people are not going to sign up if they can do elementary arithmetic, which they can. And also saying the administration is counting on mass irrationality. Do you agree with that?
I do. I mean, you asked at the outset, are we ever going to see Obamacare fully implemented? And the beauty of the situation is that there is no Obamacare. What Obamacare is whatever the Obama administration says it is today. They basically outsourced all of these decisions, regardless of what the law says, regardless of what Congress intended, regardless of the promises that they made in order to get it passed, and basically said whatever HHS and the administration want to impose, they will impose, regardless of whether or not they're required to by law. And it is fundamentally now just simply an arbitrary system by which the healthcare bureaucracy inside the federal government and the political arm of the White House gets to decide what laws are going to be enforced and which ones aren't. And that is one of the ironies here, is one of the real political consequences of this, is that these moves in the last couple of weeks, these arbitrary moves, may in fact doom immigration reform. Because one of the points that critics of immigration reform have been saying is if you can't trust this White House to obey what the law says it must do, how are they going to trust the White House to actually do the enforcement side of immigration reform either? It further erodes the general trust in this administration from all sides.
Yeah, back to Obamacare. The theory here is that the workers whose employers don't offer a plan and can buy their coverage through these subsidized marketplaces known as exchanges. But of course, the big problem there is that 27 states have not set up exchanges. So where does that go?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. There are so many. I mean, that was one of the interesting things about this panel. I mean, Rick Klein, the political director of ABC, is not exactly a noted critic of Obamacare or an arch conservative or libertarian. And this was sort of a canary in the coal mine moment, where you can kind of see some of the smarter and more perceptive political analysts saying, my gosh, this thing really is, in his words, a slow-moving train wreck, and it's only going to get worse from here. That was one of the reasons why they kicked some of this stuff past the 2014 elections, is because the Democrats are starting to run scared from it.
Yeah, and to that point, we have a new Fox News poll now out. We asked, how does Obamacare make you feel about your health care in the future? A year ago, when we asked this question, 51% were worried. That number is now 66%. That's up 15%. 36% said they were reassured a year ago, and that number is down to 23%. Now, one concern here, Jonah, is jobs. Businesses say they're going to refrain from hiring more workers or even cut their workforce due to the high costs of Obamacare. How impacted will the job? Go ahead.
I mean, you're right. We saw that in the job numbers that came out last week. The economy is undergoing this really fundamental transformation where we see more and more employers basically, this is one of the things that George Will was getting at when he talked about mass irrationality, being sort of the assumption of Obamacare. You have all of these employers saying, look, it's going to cost us an enormous amount of money to keep this many people as full-time employees because then we're going to have to qualify for all of these things under Obamacare. Let's hire fewer people and let's turn more of the people that we have hired into part-time workers so they don't qualify. And so what we saw was a massive explosion in the number of people in our economy getting paid to do part-time work when they wanted full-time work.
Right.
That's a problem, too.
Yeah. Jonah Goldberg, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Jonah Goldberg, National Review.